Hi, and welcome back to another newspaper article, Lucky Dip. Again, there's no trigger warnings, which doesn't mean to say the episode doesn't require some. I just don't know what we're going to come across yet. So if you're sensitive to varying happenings, of which, again, anything can be related in the press over the last 300 odd years, do look in the description below to see what it is that came out the hat today. Alright? So, let's find out what the hat has for us. Okay. So we have the Glasgow Weekly Mail for the 4th of December 1880. Let's see what the Glasgow Weekly Mail has for us. Okay, so I assume this is going to be a somewhat funny article, just by the title here. We have 60 miles a minute on a tin pan. We have Arthur Fitzpatrick, says the Pittsburgh Telegraph, who returned from Colorado a short time ago, gives the following account of an occurrence in the mining districts of which he was an eyewitness. A miner and some companions were crossing the Continental Divide when it was covered with snow. 3 miles below them, down a decline of 45 degrees, deeply covered with frozen snow, lay the spot they desired to reach. While to go around by trail was 15 miles, the miner took a tin pan, used for washing gold, spread his blanket over it, got in himself in a squatting position on his haunches, tucked the blanket round, held his rifle and other traps over his head, and got one of his comrades to give him a push. He informed me he went down at the speed of 60 miles a minute and shot far out into the valley at the foot of the mountain. When he stopped, he found the soldering of the pan melted from friction, his blanket on fire, and it was his impression that had he gone much further, he would have been burned up, together with all of his traps. Do we think this is a tall tale? I don't think... It doesn't seem feasible. I've never seen anyone, no matter how fast they're going down a hill, catching on fire in the snow. I'm trying to imagine it in my head, and something tells me this is something of a tall tale. 60 miles a minute? How would he even guess that? I don't know. I find that particular story very strange, and I think we could probably take that with a wee pinch of salt. Yeah, because I'm not entirely sure I believe that one. We'll see what we've got in the next article. So we have the Bath Chronicle and Weekly Gazette for the 25th of August 1842. Let's see what this has for us. So this paper has 2 articles for us. We have, initially, Discovery of a Thief by a Cat. On Tuesday forenoon, the wife of Dugald Campbell, grocer, Well Street, Calton, was sitting in a room in the rear of the shop when she observed the cat, which is kept upon the premises, setting up its bristles and seemingly in very bad humour with something below the bed. Thinking a strange cat had got into the house, Mrs. Campbell took up a walking stick and went to drive it out. But the very first stroke, the weapon convinced her that it was something of the biped order and not a quadruped she had to deal with. She consequently raised an alarm that there was somebody below the bed, and on examination this turned out to be the fact, as a woman named Catharine McKinnon, a well-known thief, was found there. How she got in, and how she remained before she was discovered, no one can tell, as she refuses to do so herself, but it seems she must have passed through the shop before she could get into the room, a feat requiring so much caution and adroitness that it appeared quite astonishing to the people belonging to the house how it had been accomplished. The delinquent was, on Friday, sentenced to 60 days' confinement in Bridewell. She had previously, it appeared, been convicted 5 times of theft and had been punished with imprisonment each time. And that's an article that was previously relayed in the Glasgow Argus. What a fright, oh my word. It's one thing to have like another animal in your house. Our late kitty Zara brought in a big orange cat into the house, apparently to gear honours against her brother Fargo. And that was a freaky experience, just seeing an animal that just wasn't supposed to be there. That was quite freaky. But a human, that's like a horror story. You're in bed, you're settling down, your cat's acting a bit weird, or you maybe hear a noise, or you get some other inkling, and there's just a person under your bed. I mean, it's happened, but it's freaky. I'm not enjoying that. I'm sure there was a couple over in America who had been settling down to sleep, and as they were lying there, there was a scratching noise, a kind of consistent scratching noise from under their bed. And they had got out. I don't know that they had looked, but they had got out of bed and escaped the house and called the authorities. And the police came and they found a woman under the bed, and she'd been slowly, with a knife, scratching under the bed in an attempt to get to them through the bottom of the bed. And I mean, you hate to think what might have happened had they gone to sleep. Do we think that had this woman not been found, all she would have done is steal some belongings? Still creepy, someone that's not supposed to be in your house just making themselves at home with your stuff without you even knowing they're there while you're asleep. Not enjoying that article. The next we have is Singular Occurrence. An incident of an extraordinary nature took place lately in the parish of Golspie in Sutherlandshire. The wife of a shoemaker had been for a considerable time lying ill of a fever, but was gradually recovering. She, however, suddenly relapsed, and as her husband and friends supposed, she died on the 2nd day after her relapse, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The usual formalities of stretching and laying out the body were adopted, and her husband procured money from his employers and ordered mourning for his family. That is, they ordered the black clothing that they would necessarily have to wear at this point on the death of a close relative. Next day, about 12 o'clock, as the joiner was taking measure of her coffin, she gave a sneeze and otherwise made a stir with her body. On taking off the grave clothes, she looked up in a wild manner and made a motion with her hand as if she wanted something to eat. A few cordials were administered to her. She was then put to bed and enjoyed a good sound sleep. She has since gradually recovered and is now quite out of danger. And that article was previously related in the Inverness Courier prior to making it into the Bath Chronicle and Weekly Gazette for the 25th of August 1842. I have the feeling, having come across quite a number of these stories myself, just randomly during research, that this must have been something that happened quite a lot without the family ever realising that they had buried a loved one alive. It must have happened so often before medical folk were able to tell for absolute certainty that there was no brain or cardiac activity. I mean, people in comas were mistaken for being dead for a long time if there wasn't the obvious signs of breathing. So, yeah, that woman had a really narrow escape. Thank goodness she sneezed. That's another freaky story. They're both freaky stories that could have had very bad endings if they hadn't been discovered. Shall we have another one? Let's see what the hat has for a final story, I think. Okay, so we have the Dundee, Perth and Cooper Advertiser for the 14th of January, 1848. Let's see what the Dundee, Perth and Cooper Advertiser has for us. Okay, so to end us, we have a strange occurrence. A very strange occurrence happened last week in the neighbourhood of Llangeitho. A poor woman who occupied a part of a small cottage, in one end of which, separated only by a partition, lived other people, was taken ill and after a short time died. The corpse having been laid out in the usual manner, the neighbours left the house and locked the door. They were, however, soon aroused by a very strange noise in the deceased's apartment, similar to hard coughing, which, as might be supposed, frightened them not a little. But no notice was taken of it. But on entering the apartment the next morning, they found the corpse turned on one side, the eyes wide open, and the bands that tied the hands together were loose, and the sheet that covered the body thrown off. It is presumed that the deceased must have been in a kind of trance when laid out, and afterwards, in the agonies of death, struggled violently. The neighbours are greatly to blame for not entering the house when they heard the coughing. Did we not just have an escape from being buried alive? Oh my goodness. Do we think it was the fright that this woman got that effectively ended her? Having woken up and realised that she's been put in burial clothes and her hands are tied, etc. Oh, God. And it doesn't matter how scared they were, they should absolutely have made sure both that the woman was actually dead on hearing the coughing, but also to ensure that there wasn't anybody that shouldn't have been there in with the body who was giving the coughs. There's no reason for them not to have at least had a peek to see where that noise was coming from. I wonder if they'd found her, she may have lived a wee bit longer. Because they'd have been able to put her mind at rest that, oh, we're so sorry, but this is how we found you and we've assumed, and obviously you haven't roused any suspicion of being alive because we were able to, perform the varying formalities in order to proceed your funeral. But again, this stuff happened all the time. People just being assumed to be dead, and it was only after the fact that they were found to be alive in whatever manner that happened. The scariest stories are those that are waking up during their autopsies. And I'm not surprised they would wake up during that. I mean, that's surgery without anaesthetic. Oh. Okay. Well, it has just been Halloween, and I feel like those stories very much fit the mood of the season. So we'll call that an end to this episode, because I'm scared that we're going to get another story exactly the same as these non-dead dead people stories. And I think we all need a break before another one of those. So we may see you next time. Take care.